Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. So today we're finally checking out the new OPETH record, The Last Will and Testament. I say finally because they've had a lot of teasers come out in the last like 3 months, sort of marking their return to form, and it is a return to form. This record is a fair bit heavier than they have been on their last few, and apparently it's their first concept record since Still Life. Okay, so let's start with the track rundown. These are in paragraph forms. I'm either going to call them paragraph 1, section 1, S1, a variation of that. Sorry, I am still a little bit sick, so my voice is a little iffy. But starting with section 1, so right off the bat, the guitars are instantly heavier than they have been in a decade plus. The growls sound good, they sound full. I will say the talking back vocals during the sort of chorus sections, I wasn't a big fan of. It's still very proggy sounding, it's a little bit less like Sorceress and a little bit more like the more recent Incauda Veterum. The guitar solo is quite insane, and the section at the end helps with the vibe of the whole conceptual thing. It leads quite well into section 2. On to section 2. Cool intro verse section to kick it off, has a nice bass vibe when the clean vocals come in. Very proggy section with the talking and Michael sort of wailing in the background. The keys sound great. It has a cinematic vibe to it, sort of with the rising keys everywhere. It's definitely not the catchiest song in the album. Feels like more like a concept song. There's lots of changes. It's very transitionary. It's like a bit of a mess. It's not bad, but it feels more like a jumble of ideas and movement rather than a song per se. It just sort of has this put together kind of feel to it. Section 3, the song feels a little bit more akin to the sort of later prog OPETH albums. The keys are cinematic. There's great singing with the heavy guitars sort of around the 2-minute mark in particular. I thought this one was really well written. The guitars are heavy and gives lots of space for the vocals to really push the melody, and it ends really nicely as well. Section 4, the bass intro with the keys is cool. The guitar line is a little bit weird but very unique. I really liked the layering with the vocals, the back and forth with the cleans and the growls. I thought it was really funny that he finally got his like minstrel section around the 2-minute mark. It does sound like a lute kind of thing. Has a big switch and feel with sort of that aqualung flute, and I believe it is what's his name, John Anderson. I did also think it was really cool going from that into a solo section. I also love the melody and sort of the way the chords were held in that sort of section as well. Section 5 is kind of just grooving through this one. It starts off with a very Pale Communion meets Watershed kind of feel. The switch into the heavy bit around the 2-minute mark was very smooth. Bit of a weird vibe on this one, lots of movement, starts and stops. Kind of a similar jumble as section 2. Section 6, really warm guitar tone, sounds nice, it's not super distorted. I feel like this was a bit of their like rush moment. That warm tone clashes a bit with the growling vocals, I thought. But despite that, it was a cool track, has some really great drumming. The beat switches work really well. There's a really nice pulse to the whole thing. The outro was nice, but it did sort of feel like how Blood Incantation switched between sections on their latest record as well. Section 7, great riff to start off this one. It goes along really well with the held keys. The talking bit, When the actual song starts, it's really cool. Nice grooves with the bass. I thought they were trying a little bit for like a Deliverance type of rhythm around the 3-minute mark, which was cool. And I thought the outro caps sort of the main album very well. I liked their use of the timpani to sort of give that hard kind of thundering bass drum sounds. And the last track is A Story Never Told. I would have been fine without it. It does pick up a little bit around the 3-minute mark. I did feel like the vocal melody and flow just sort of lacked any real movement or character to it. And I also didn't really feel like they knew what they were doing with it either. Even the guitar solo itself had them going back to that same vocal melody. And I would honestly probably just skip this one and repeat listens and just end it at section 7. So what did I think of it? I liked it quite a bit. Shocker. I thought it was nice to have the band at least sort of acknowledging the path that sort of led them to where they are now. But at the same time, this is not a death metal record. And actually, I think this is maybe some of the proggiest they've ever been. The rhythms were often that pulsing groove thing. They've definitely been leaning on that since like post Watershed, but at the same time still gone are the atmospheric passages. The riff sections are quite a bit shorter, and we don't have those like strumming kind of guitar lines from, you know, like Harlequin Forest, or like even earlier than that, stuff like Drapery Falls or anything like that. So I think some Opeth fans might still be missing that, and honestly I am a little bit as well. I will say this being a concept record made it so that I felt like they had a little bit more sway with being creative with strong structure and application of instrumentation than they have on their like last couple records. The songs move fast for Opeth, in part I think because of the conceptual design of the album, because I think like on the last 2-3 records, basically since Sorceress, they kind of wanted to have the big chorus moments and stuff like that, the sort of arena kind of thing almost. I think in Caught of Venom they had a little bit more of a feel like this one. They leaned just a little bit more on that pulsy sort of rhythm, rather than the chorus, the sort of big held notes and everything else like that. But I do like them in this sort of creative space, and I do like the movement of the record, even if sometimes it maybe detracts from certain parts and certain song feeling kind of thing. This one felt very narrative, and if we're going back to their previous concept album, Still Life, I still feel like in each of those songs is a self-contained idea. Whereas with this one, I feel like it's more of the album is sort of a sum of its parts rather than individual songs. And I think part of that too is just how they went about doing the conception, right? Like even the sections are part of one larger Last Will and Testament, right? So I thought that was an interesting creative choice. For the other bits, I thought the new drummer, Waltteri, what's his last name? Opeth drummer. Waltteri Väyrynen. I thought he sounded great on this record. He didn't miss a beat. I thought his ghost notes and his drum rolls were like dead on for the Opeth sound. I think he's been a really good addition for them, and you can see it on this album as well. He like fits right in. You never know, right? When you switch somebody like that, so much of a feel of a record is through the drumming. And it's nice that he slots in really well. They made a really good choice with him. I liked him a lot on this one. I did think the use of vocal stylings was pretty cool, and I liked the panning, especially to sort of like convey conversation. I'm still not big on like talking bits, but they weren't too distracting, I think, on this one. I did also feel that sometimes the guitars felt a little bit buried in the mix, especially when the Hammond organ like really comes front and center. But overall, I really liked the record. It doesn't really sound like a ton like old Opeth. It doesn't sound like Blackwater Park. It doesn't sound like Watershed. It doesn't sound like any of those records, but it also doesn't really sound like one of the new Progpeth records either. Like, besides In Caught of Venom, it didn't sound like Heritage, didn't sound like Pale Communion, maybe Pale Communion a little, but it does seem to have its own sonic signature, right? But there were definitely bits of it where, like, you know, some of those flashes kind of came through, and I think that's nice to kind of pay homage and track the journey and that kind of thing. It was a pleasant return to form. The songwriting's strong, vocal sounded great as always, although I thought sometimes maybe the clean singing was maybe not as great as it has been on some past records. Just some of the use of his high register singing was a little eh. The guitar solos were varied and interesting, and the whole record was dripping with groove. So overall, I quite liked it. It's not quite the renaissance that I think anyone was necessarily hoping for, but I do think this is a really nice sort of middle ground between people who really like the newer prog style Opeth and people who are really old fans of Opeth. I think this is something that both groups could enjoy, and for them that's really smart. I'm going to give the record an 8 out of 10. I think it's a solid sort of grade. I think it's a solid record. It's not quite top of the, you know, top of the year kind of thing, but it is a really great record, and I think it's really worth checking out if you're a fan of prog, if you're a fan of Opeth. I think it's a really nice, just a nice return to form for them. So I'll leave it there. I'll catch you in the next one. You know, this one took a little while to come out, but we got there. All right. We'll catch you in the next one. Deuces.